Wartime Speech, Winston Churchill, May 19th, 1940, BBC, London. First broadcast as Prime Minister. I speak to you for the first time as Prime Minister in a solemn hour for the life of our country, of our empire, of our allies, and above all, of the cause of freedom. A tremendous battle is raging in France and Flanders. The Germans, by a remarkable combination of air bombing and heavily armored tanks, have broken through the French defenses north of the Maginot Line. In strong columns of their armored vehicles are ravaging the open country, which for the first day or two was without defenders. They have penetrated deeply and spread alarm and confusion in their track. Behind them there are now appearing infantry and lorries, and behind them, again, large masses are moving forward. The regroupment of the French armies to make head against, and also strike at, this intruding wedge has been proceeding on for several days, largely assisted by the magnificent efforts of the Royal Air Force. We must not allow ourselves to be intimidated by the presence of these armored vehicles in unexpected places behind our lines. If they are behind our front, the French are also at many points fighting actively behind theirs. Both sides are therefore in an extremely dangerous position, and if the French army and our own army are well handled, as I believe they will be, if the French retain that genius for recovery and counter-attack for which they have so long been famous, and if the British army shows the dogged endurance and solid fighting power of which have been so many examples in the past, then a sudden transformation of this scene might spring into being. It would be foolish, however, to disguise the gravity of the hour. It will still be more foolish to lose heart and courage, or to suppose that well-trained, well-equipped armies, numbering from 3 to 4 millions of men, can be overcome in the space of a few weeks, or even months, by a scoop, or raid of mechanized vehicles, however formidable. We may look with confidence to the stabilization of the front in France, and to the general engagement of the masses, which will enable the qualities of the French and British soldiers to be matched squarely against those of their adversaries. For myself, I have invincible confidence in the French army and its leaders. Only a very small part of that splendid army has yet been heavily engaged, and only a very small part of France has yet been invaded. There is a good evidence to show that practically the whole of the specialized and mechanized forces of the enemy have been already thrown out into battle, and we know that very heavy losses have been inflicted upon them. No officer or man, no brigade or division which grapples at close quarters with the enemy, wherever encountered, can fail to make a worthy contribution to the general result. The armies must cast away the idea of resisting behind concrete lines or natural obstacles, and must realize that mastery can only be regained by furious and unrelenting assault. And this spirit must not only animate the high command, but must inspire every fighting man. In the air, often at serious odds, often at odds hitherto thought overwhelming, we have been clawing down 3 or 4 to 1 of our enemies, and the relative balance of British and German air forces is now considerably favorable to us at the beginning of the battle. In cutting down the German bombers, we are fighting our own battle as well as that of the France. May confidence in our ability to fight it out and finish with the German Air Force has been strengthened by fierce encounters which have taken place and are taking place. At the same time, our heavy bombers are striking nightly at the tap root of German mechanized power, and have already inflicted serious damage upon the oil refineries of which the Nazi effort to dominate the world directly depends. We must expect that as soon as stability is reached on the Western Front, the bulk of that hideous apparatus of aggression which gashed Holland into ruin and slavery in a few days will be turned upon us. I am sure I speak for all when I say we are ready to face it, to endure it, and to retaliate against it, to any extent that unwritten laws of war permit. There will be many men and many women on that island who, when the ordeal comes upon them, as come it will feel comfort and even pride that they are sharing the perils of our lads at the front, soldiers, sailors, and airmen, God bless them, and are drawing away from them a part at least of the onslaught they have to bear. Is not this appointed time for all to make the utmost exertions in their power? If the battle is to be won, we must provide our men with ever-increasing quantities of weapons and ammunition they need. We must have, and have quickly, more aeroplanes, more tanks, more shells, more guns. There is imperious need for these vital munitions. They increase our strength against the powerfully armed enemy. They replace the wastage of the obstinate struggle, and the knowledge that wastage will speedily be replaced enables us to draw more readily upon our reserves and throw them in now that everything counts so much. Our task is not only to win the battle, but to win the war.
After this battle in France abates its force, there will come battle for our island. For all that Britain is and all that Britain means, that will be the struggle. In that supreme emergency, we shall not hesitate to take every step, even the most drastic, to call forth from our people the last ounce and the last inch of effort of which they are capable. The interests of property, the hours of labor, are nothing compared with the struggle of life and honor for right and freedom to which we have vowed ourselves. I have received the chiefs of the French Republic, and in particular form its indomitable Prime Minister, Emerard, the most sacred pledges that whatever happens, they will fight to the end, be it bitter or glorious. Nay, if we fight to the end, it can be glorious. Having received His Majesty's commission, I have formed an administration of men and women of every party and of almost every point of view. We have differed and quarreled in the past, but now one bond unites us all, to wage war until victory is won, and never to surrender ourselves to servitude and to shame, whatever the cost and agony may be. This is one of the most awe-striking periods in the long history of France and Britain. It is beyond doubt and the most sublime. Side by side, unaided, except by their kith and kin, in the great dominions and by the wide empires which rest beneath their shield, side by side, the British and the French peoples have advanced to rescue not only Europe but mankind from the foulest and most soul-destroying tyranny which has ever darkened and stained the pages of history. Behind them, behind us, behind the armies and fleets of Britain and France, gather a group of shattered states and bludgeoned races, the Czechs, the Poles, the Norwegians, the Danes, the Dutch, the Belgians, upon all of whom the long night of barbarism will descend, unbroken even by a star of hope, unless we conquer, as conquer we must, and conquer we shall. Today is Trinity Sunday. Centuries ago, words were written to be call and a spur to faithful servants of truth and justice. Arm yourselves, and be ye men of valor, and be in readiness for the conflict, for it is better to perish in battle than look upon the outrage of our nation and our altar. As the will of God is in heaven, even so let it be. For my FOA for Part 2 of the course, Language and Mass Media, I have analyzed the wartime speech from Prime Minister Churchill during World War II. I have looked over how his persuasive capabilities and his deliverance of such a broadcast that would be able to pull together a nation in a dire time when the German forces were consuming France under their dark regime. How this man convinces the people that they will not only be able to change the flow of the war, but he calls upon his people to act as a collective group to advance their strength in the war. The manipulation and bias against the imposing German regime allows him to use his enemy's success as a reason to push an offensive and enter the war at a deeper level. His powerful diction is utilized in a sense that makes him exaggerate the force of machines and power that the Nazis were, while also building up the British spirit to make everyone on the home front feel that they were able to contribute, just by holding on to belief and hope that justice will prevail. The first device I located was one used for persuasive propaganda, card stacking, because of how he convinced the people that the Nazi regime is the most powerful force on the earth. He makes them seem like they're monsters and machines with how they invade and attack France and other smaller countries. His use of propaganda technique, plain folks as well, makes his cause seem like something that all of Britain wants, since he compares his combined offices as the combined force of the common people. His reasoning for entering the war has been justified by higher authorities, and after informing of the recent events between German and French fronts of the war, which already means that the people don't have a choice to enter, simply showing that there is a false dilemma. How Churchill twists the use of propaganda that would normally compel people to fear the enemy are now messages of what hope they can bring if they unite and face off against Germany in the war. The use of rhetorical devices that fall along with the specific rhetorical question of, is not this the appointed time for all to make the utmost exertions in their power, which implies that now is the time to put all of their power into the war because of its importance to the people's freedom. The use of metanoia makes the Nazis seem like this dominating force that wants the entire world under their foot. But Churchill's anaphoras and hyperbole lead to several different lines which are made to be quotable so the common population will remember what he has to say about the Nazis and for the cause the speech was made for. Simple phrases such as, "Nay, if we fight to the end, it can only be glorious," and "As the will of God is in heaven, even so let it be," are made to persuade the people to fight through fear with hope and know that in the end they can win. How fear is spun around through the speech makes for each advance of the Nazis much grander and impactful to the British and French home fronts, which Churchill used to convey a sense of bias that would fall within the social norms and not be spun against his intention to initiate the frontal force that is the British military and unite the parties in government trying to find the best road to take, without sounding like a warmonger hungry for this big battle. Though the speech builds up a feeling of fear, that comes with the resolve of hope and freedom, and how the devices build up the concept of this war being the key to a prosperous freedom for the British people, and hope that the new age will come from the Germans' defeat. The last and most important device Churchill uses is his powerful choice of diction. An example of this I will read. We must expect that as soon as stability is reached on the Western Front, the bulk of that hideous apparatus of aggression which gnashed Holland into ruin and slavery in a few days will be turned upon us. I am sure I speak for all when I say we are ready to face it, to endure it, and to retaliate against it, to any extent that the unwritten laws of war permit. When conveying a speech that is intended to be heard by millions and convince them that the war is imminent and joining it is imminent, it is necessary that you use language to persuade the people so that they can understand. His diction shows all aspects of the situation that Britain is left with, and he composes this in an order of striking fear, building up with power, and resolving the issue with hope. The fear aspect comes with how he emphasizes the Nazis' success and their military might over smaller nations, as they are absorbing them, calling them a hideous apparatus. The might and powerful diction addresses both the strengths of the Nazis and the British, which is meant to be a comparison to show no matter what fear the Nazis can instill, Britain can always come back stronger and take their progress down, which then adds in the concept that hope shared for their soldiers will bring them victory. How Churchill uses the mixture of propaganda techniques, commanding diction, and rhetoric makes for an inspiring speech that would lead the British people to victory against the Nazis. Churchill chose his words to make them sound much more common and simple when it came to persuading the population after he made his arguments and explanations on causes for further entering the war. He was also able to convey the general concept of hope onto several different views, tying it with religion, military, power, oppressed countries, and the strength of the British people if they stand together. What stands out the most is that this was his first broadcast as a Prime Minister, so he had to take into consideration the views of the war from the common person's perspective, which was something to fear, and he used that fear to get their attention and to reveal what was happening in France and what would happen if they did nothing to help. However, his other main use of literary and propaganda devices was to bring out the hope in the people, by explaining that as a united force, they are more powerful than any machines that Germany could produce, and that when you understand all of the fear, there is only one thing that can change through hope. This concludes my FOA and for laying in the Lit A for Part 2 of Language and Mass Communication, and thank you for listening.